if there was a way for science to make it easier for us to deal with wind, wildfire, hail, and rain? Well, actually there is. And so I want you to stay tuned for this upcoming episode of MYD Global as we interview someone who's making a real difference in that area. Thank you. Welcome. Today in this episode, we have someone very special calling to talk to us from South Carolina. And his name is Dr. Ian Giammanco, and he is with the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. And welcome to this episode of MYD Global. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and before we get started?
Yeah, hi, I'm Ian, everybody. My background is actually in atmospheric science. I'm a meteorologist by training. I study how the weather impacts the built environment and how you can simulate that. I got into weather at a pretty young age. I was 12 years old when Hurricane Andrew made its kind of second landfall in South Louisiana. I'm a native of Louisiana. My family's lived in South Louisiana for some time. And that hooked me on the weather. I really just wanted to be like Jim Cantori out there standing out in the storm, telling folks what's happening. Over time, I gravitated more into research and studying how severe weather does affect you and I. But I knew at a young age I really wanted to be a part of this field and try to make a difference and make the world a better place.
That's awesome. So tell me about the Institute. I know just how it's funded, how it got started.
Yeah, so IBHS, we've been around in some form since the 1970s. However, in 2010, there was an investment by the property insurance world into developing IBHS into a world-class research center. And that's when our laboratory opened here in South Carolina. The model that we actually use is very similar to the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety that does car crash tests. We crash test buildings for severe weather. That's that in a nutshell. So we are funded through the property insurance world. Each one of our members pays a set of dues, and that supplies the funding to do our research. We also do conventional funding sources through, say, the Conventional National Science Foundation, federal government, those kind of things. And we have lots of academic partners as well as government lab folks. So really it was a major investment from the insurance industry in trying to make us more resilient to severe weather and really stop that cycle of destruction and disruption that we see time and time again.
Yeah, and I think that what's key too is I know, anytime I've been in a community, it's that insurance piece that's always a bit of an issue. And so to see the insurance companies, the industry putting money into research like this and solutions, I think that's fantastic because at the end of the day, both parties are going to win. Right.
That's right. You can. I've always thought that we can really stop the financial loss trend, but also help people in terms of reducing the amount of disruption. You can get a check for a claim, but that's not going to change the fact that if you got water in your home, whether it's through the front door or the roof, that you're out of there for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, or you're living in a house with gutted drywall. It doesn't put those pieces back together. It doesn't put all those personal things you have, all your keepsakes. I have a 2-year-old. I have a lot of things that I want to keep of hers and I want to keep safe. That check is not going to replace those things. So we can do it all. I really believe that, and we can really start to stop this cycle.
So tell me about the facility. What's it look like? What kinds of things go on there?
So if you come in the front gate, we're actually well out in the country here in South Carolina, basically between Columbia and Charlotte. You would see our 105 fans that make up our full-scale wind tunnel. That's the centerpiece of the campus here. We can fit essentially 2 side-by-side 2-story homes in this facility in our full-scale test chamber. We can subject those structures to extreme winds, wind-driven rain, hailstorms, wildfire ember attack scenarios. And the idea is to see how building systems and their various components respond when all these severe weather hazards attack them.
So you do primarily research, to my understanding, in 4 key areas. So let's talk first about wind. So what's the type of stuff that you're doing when it comes to wind research?
So when we're looking at how homes respond as a system. So all the different connections, whether it's the wall to foundation, roof to wall connections, how all those respond. We actually did quite a bit of work a year or two ago looking at this and understanding how those forces are actually distributed. And that's where we actually came up with the guidance that if a hurricane's coming, you're evacuating, shut your interior doors. It's one little tiny tidbit of preparedness that you can do. It helps compartmentalize some of those forces acting on your roof. And it could make the difference in mitigating some damage. That's one aspect in wind. We're also looking at the vulnerability of garage doors. That's a really big opening that you can have if you have an attached garage. We're trying to understand, one, how good are wind-rated garage doors? What are ones that aren't? We know if you puncture that opening and the air can get inside your home, it can start working up, out, and start really exacerbating the damage that can happen. So we want to see, are there solutions out there? Are they affordable? And are there configurations that can work? And the next piece is, how bad is the bad part of that? How much of this is a vulnerability? We see those garage doors punctured in hurricanes and tornadoes. So it's time we take a pretty good hard look at what's happening.
Yeah. So what about wildfire? I know one of the things that I saw a little while ago, you had a demo where it was two houses or it was actually maybe one house with half of it with certain types of materials and half with traditional materials, and showing what happened. And so speak a little bit about the fire piece, the wildfire piece.
Yeah, so we get to study in our big test chamber how embers land and ignite materials and can flow around a house. So we did some work where we had basically a duplex structure. One side had fire resistant type materials, so concrete fiberboard siding, proper spacing between landscaping. So that means maintaining a 5-foot zone around the home of non-combustible materials that had rock mulch. And the other side was all combustible materials, combustible siding. The vegetation was right up against the house. There was no protections for the deck feature that was on it. And then we basically turned our ember generators on and showered the home with burning embers, as in a wildland fire scenario. And what we saw was a very quick ignition can happen on the side that had all the combustible materials. And within about 5 to 10 minutes or so, we had a side of the house that was fully engulfed in flames. It was the side with the proper materials that are non-combustible was sitting there taking pretty much everything the ember generators could throw at it and perfectly fine. And so these type of materials are cost effective. It's just making that choice to do the right thing and keep your defensible space and make the right material choices.
Yeah, no, and it's exciting to see all the different options people have now too. And at the end of the day, and a little investment up front could actually save you a lot of money in the long term. So I think that's the message people have to start to understand as well. What about hail? I mean, for many places, that's another issue that they're dealing with. So what's the type of research you're doing in this area?
Yeah, hail is, we kind of joke it's one of the forgotten perils, but anywhere in the US, Canada, Australia, Europe has a hail threat. And here in the U.S., severe storms cause, we're well over the 10 billion mark now in total damage, and a good chunk of that is hail and roof replacements. So we spent a lot of science looking at how to manufacture hailstones in our laboratory that match what you see in the real world and how hail can attack a roof. So we released earlier this year our very first set of impact rated shingle performance scores. So these are shingles that are designed as impact rated and are meant to provide some degree of resiliency against hail impacts. Well, as it turns out through our test results that not all are created equal. There is very much a range in performance, and we tested against 2-inch laboratory hailstones. And you can actually find those results on our website, disastersafety.org, as well as IBHS.org. You can see those first set of scoring results, and it lists the products by manufacturer and which ones perform well and which ones don't. So if you're re-roofing after a hailstorm and you're just really tired of the inconvenience, there are products out there that can help.
That's great. I know a friend of mine, I think she's had hail damage 3 times, and I think her insurance company told her, you do this again and you're not getting covered. So, I mean, I think I might share this with her. What about rain? I mean, that's the final area you guys do a lot of research in. So what would you be doing in that area?
Yeah, this is an area we often see in hurricanes, and especially what I would say are the lower end non-extreme hurricanes. So those are the Saffir-Simpson kind of category 1, 2 type storms, where we see enough wind that's going to cause asphalt. And water has the opportunity through wind-driven rain to get through the seams in your plywood deck on your roof. And you basically now have a flood that's coming through your roof, not your front door. But the problem is the result is the same. We all know if water gets in our house, that is nothing good is going to come of that. So we're looking at, one, the steps through our Fortified Home program and our Fortified Roof piece that can help mitigate that. And that's by taping or sealing your roof deck. So you can use tape to seal those seams between the plywood joints on your roof. You can do this when you're re-roofing. My parents actually just did it. They live in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and they just put in a fortified roof. There's about 4 different ways to do it. And that's that barrier that can help keep the water out. That's your line of defense, because in those kind of wind conditions that a hurricane brings, you are going to lose shingles. It's going to happen, and you need that protection behind it to keep that flood coming from the roof.
Exactly. So would your work primarily be for homeowners or businesses or both?
We do both in both commercial and residential sectors. A lot of the research in terms of applications and things you can do to mitigate some of this damage is focused on residential. However, our Fortified program does extend into the commercial space. So there's a lot out there, essentially at all price points. I mentioned Fortified Roof. If you're building a new home, we have the Fortified Gold standard, which actually helps tie the structure together and really reduce the probability of any kind of structural damage in extreme winds. This takes your home above what is the code design standards for your area. So all different prices out there. I mentioned the sealed roof deck. If you're just taping your seams on a re-roof job, it's $500 to $800 more when you're doing your re-roof, and that can save you times 3 in terms of damage, and throw in the displacement factor. It can save you from being in a hotel with your kids and your dogs in a really small space for 4 to 5 months.
Yeah. So if as we're talking, Hurricane Dorian is going up the coast, and I'm just curious, what would your message be to people right now as far as, there's the immediate piece as to what to do, but also after you're done, what are some of the things that would be the smart things to do in order to mitigate for future hazards?
That's right. Right now, the classic preparedness tips. The window is almost closed for that in the Carolinas here as the storm moves up the coast. But afterwards, if you find yourself in a position where you do need to re-roof, I would encourage people to explore the Fortified Roof program here at IBHS, especially in North Carolina. There is some incentives in place that are out there. Please take a look at that, especially if you're re-roofing. That can be an opportunity to help mitigate that water entry for the next storm. We all know this part of the world, anywhere along the East Coast and the Gulf of Mexico, we've seen countless hurricanes. It will happen again. It might not be next year, it might be, but if you have that opportunity when you're re-roofing, that's the time. That is the time to take this step in trying to mitigate things. Yeah.
What about, I guess, in closing, is there anything specific you'd want to say to people, or anything we've missed that you might want to mention?
When severe weather kind of attacks your home, it always starts with the roof. Roof's the first line of defense. So you want to make that as strong and as durable as you can. But also remember, there's a lot of different things you can do, from essentially no cost all the way up to some serious construction work. Just take that first step. Start down that path. I'll use my parents as an example. They've always prepared very well for hurricanes. But finally, they needed a new roof, and they decided to take that next step and got a fortified roof out of it. Once you start, work with your neighbors. It can be an interesting activity. And a lot of social science has shown us, once you start down in this resiliency path, most people keep going and do more and more and more. It became extremely rewarding for my folks. And they talk about their roof all the time and how proud they are of it, which I would have never thought would have happened. So we know the steps that can be done, and we just encourage people, when that time comes, please take a look and ask questions. Yeah. We shop around a lot of things these days. You can shop your roof. If the questions you hear or answers from a roofer or a contractor don't make sense, yeah, that should raise some red flags, and you should question that. We shop everything around these days. Why not your roof?
Yeah, that's great. And so on your website, you mentioned 2. You've got a disastersafety.org and an IBHS.org. Can you mention, what's the difference between the 2?
So disastersafety.org is where we have a lot of our consumer do-it-yourself type stuff. There's a lot of consumer guidance there. These are the outputs that research has told us work. On IBHS.org, if you really want to see what we're doing here at the lab and some of the really cool stuff, go there. We have lots of cool footage on our YouTube channel as well as Vimeo. So just search for the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. And some of that cool factor gets you into the resilience mindset. We've done our job. So please check those out. Disastersafety.org for all that consumer-facing stuff and your DIY pieces there. Please have at it. Check us out and give us a follow, especially on social media, Facebook and Twitter. We're out there.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much. And so that kind of wraps up this episode. And I once again appreciate Dr. Giammanco from South Carolina, the Insurance Institute for Home and Business Safety. Boy, that's a mouthful. IBHS, I know why you say that acronym now. And for those of you who are interested in anything else disaster, please continue to subscribe and tune in, and we'll have more and more information like that that we shared today. And please, in the future, keep us in mind, because I'd love to see some of the future research you're doing. Is there anything you could kind of give us a hint on some of that up and coming research that you're doing?
So sneak peek, we're going to do a little more commercial work, looking at some commercial structures in the big chamber next year. We may also explore solar panels and how those could introduce a vulnerability. We'll be updating our hail results every 2 years, but there's also some new products in terms of hail that'll come out. So please keep an eye on that. And that includes some interesting work on some new shingles that are made out of composite plastic material and how those may perform in a hailstorm. So please check us out. There's always new stuff coming, always new things to be had out there. And please give us a follow, and we appreciate any type of outreach, questions, comments, all those fun things. We're here to help, and that's our mission.
That's great. Thanks a lot. And so that concludes our episode. And so in the interim, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.